My name is Neshen Mudley. I'm the director of the Sydney Film Festival, and very happy to have spent the last week at this wonderful, delightful festival. It's really a great privilege to host this conversation with the wonderful, fantastic RUBEN ÖSTLUND, winner of the Palme d'Or for his brilliant, outrageous, hilarious, and provocative new film, Triangle of Sadness. It is most deserved, with the rare ability to combine genuine entertainment, satire, and social critique. He's one of the most distinctive filmmakers working today, a filmmaking X-ray machine of contemporary society. We are very grateful to him for being here with us in Marrakesh and to spend this time in conversation. Please join me in giving a very, very warm welcome to RUBEN ÖSTLUND.
Wow, thank you. That was nice.
Welcome, RUBEN. We're going to talk about your career, all your fiction films, and we're going to show clips from them. But I want to start by congratulating you on the Palme d'Or. It's an incredible achievement. For some, the Oscars are the pinnacle of film prizes, but I think for me and many like me, winning the Palme d'Or is the most prestigious, important prize in the world. I want to know what does it mean for you winning the Palme d'Or, not just once, but twice, and you joined this very rarefied group of people who've won twice. The Dardennes, Francis Ford Coppola, Haneke, Kusturica, Ken Loach, some others, but not many others. What does it mean for you?
Well, I can tell you first time when it happened with the Square, 2017. Then it was really a surreal feeling. It's interesting, you know, when you screen your film in Cannes, first you're very nervous just for the screening, and when you have a good screening, slowly you start to hope for maybe we will win a prize. It might be that you get invited to the award ceremony, so okay, maybe this is a signal. You don't know, of course. And you're sitting there and they are handing out prize after prize. And finally, it's only one prize left. And you think either there's a horrible mistake, I'm not going to win anything, or we're going to win the Palme d'Or. And when it happened with the Square, it was a complete surreal feeling that we won the Palme d'Or. I never thought this would happen to me. I know that there are so many great filmmakers in the world that have never won the Palme d'Or. You don't only have to make a great film, you also have to make a film that is corresponding with the jury. So there's so many aspects of it, so you just can't count on it. And then when it happened with the Square, it actually put a lot of pressure on me as a film director. After that, it comes so many, people that want to work with you, and it's almost like a balloon that is blowing up that becomes too big. And you can lose your way of working a little bit because there are so many people approaching you. When we were starting to do Triangle of Sadness, everybody just expects the film will be in competition in Cannes. Okay, period. So the ones that are putting money into the film, the distributors that are pre-buying the film, everybody just expects the film will be in competition. So when you're starting to cut the film, when you're starting to work with the film, for me, it was a huge pressure because I just had to make it into competition. Otherwise, I'm letting a lot of people down. So for me, getting into competition with Triangle of Sadness is, okay, my work is done, great. Now I have delivered what I should deliver. Once again, we had a fantastic screening in Cannes. And it was probably the best screening I've had of any of my films. And I was so surprised because I had a great screening with Force Majeure, I had a great screening with the Square. And I thought, okay, I have experienced good screenings. Now probably soon it will be like, you know, whether people are booing or... And it was an even better screening this time. So once again, you start to hope for a prize. And the closer you get to the Saturday, the award ceremony, and okay, we are invited to go to the award ceremony. We know it doesn't mean anything. Prize after prize is just going to other directors, and finally, there only one prize left. And we are starting to look at each other in the team, you know, like, well, is it going to happen again? And I'm going to be honest with you now, because I'm very, very humble to winning this prize. But there was a slight, like 1 or 2 seconds when I felt, do I really want this? Do I want to go on this tour again? Do I want to promote the film again? And then we won, and of course I'm super, super happy. You start to look on the list, as you said, like who are the other directors that have had this kind of experience? And you like 5 years ago, they were the gods. They were the ones that I look up to so much, and like Michael Haneke or all the directors that you were mentioning. And and I also have to say what happened now afterwards when I've been touring with Triangle of Sadness. Okay, we won the Palme 2 times now, the team that I'm working with. A small fantasy starts to grow. Maybe it's possible to win it again. And you know, I know how hard it is, but it's great to use that as a motivation for the team, because you know, when it comes to filmmaking, it's so hard to push up like the right motivation. I very often when I'm making my movies, I'm setting a goal for the team. For example, when we did Force Majeure, I said, okay, we're going to create the most spectacular avalanche scene in the history of filmmaking. And then everybody knows, oh my God, we have to push hard if we are going to achieve this. And when we are doing the vomiting scene in Triangle of Sadness, okay, we have to go 10 steps further than the audience expect us to go. And now when we're going to start with the next project, I've said, okay, it have to be so good so we actually can win the Palme a 3rd time. And then the team is going to push it, you know, so yeah.
I want to talk about my reaction of the first screening in Cannes. And I went to, it was the first day of Cannes, it was the screening for buyers. So these are usually, even if the film is a masterpiece, they're usually very somber affairs. No one claps at the end. No one does anything at the screening. Sometimes people are on their phones trying to make a deal. And people just went crazy. People were literally screaming with laughter at this buyer's screening. And it was the first film I'd seen in the cinema in a long time at a big festival. I hadn't traveled because I was locked in Australia, trapped in Australia. And I had 2 feelings when I saw the film. The first was, you had really gone for it with no holds barred. Like really, it was wild and ambitious and unlike anything I'd seen for a very long time. And I felt you'd made it for a broader audience. And I felt it was really precisely the film we needed in its wildness to sort of kickstart this art house business that we need to somehow save and preserve. The idea of people going to the cinema to see something spectacular and crazy.
Yeah.
Were you thinking this when you were making the film?
Well, you know, when you start at film school as a film director, and you're starting to fantasize about what kind of director you want to be, it's almost, you know, it's almost like that you are trying to play the cool guy. If you compare it to go on a disco when you are in high school, and then many of the directors are trying to stand in the corner and play cool, and they hope for someone to come up and dance with them. And it never happens, of course. And it's almost like that this kind of posing as a film director, when it comes to art house cinema, was something that I was a little bit affected of, I felt, in the start of my career. I was a product of the European state-founded cinema. And what I thought that happened when it came to Europe and to Sweden, for example, and if you're a director or a producer of cinema in these countries, when we get the money from the state, we are economically safe, and we don't have to punch all the way out to reach the audience. So slowly it have created a certain kind of art house genre that is, how do you say, putting itself on top of the audience a little bit. And I started to realize this when I did a film called Play. Play was a film that was it's 42 sequence shots. That is, it was very hard to create any dynamics in it. And when we had the premiere screening in Cannes, it was in Cannes, in Cannes. In front of me, in the audience, is an older couple sitting. And when the first shot of Play starts, it's a long sequence shot. I see the man that is sitting in this couple. He starts to look up in the roof like, ah. And he's like, oh my God, what film have I ended up on? And he almost during the whole screening, me and the producer were sitting just behind these people, and you can understand what a horrible premiere screening we have of our own film. And this guy, he refuses to look on the screen during the whole screening. And I realized that I have been sitting by myself and editing this film, and I had not test screened it. I had not sat together with an audience. I had just like been a little bit like the, how to say, yeah, protecting my work. And if I'm doing cinema for an audience, where an audience is going to participate in it, I realized I have to approach this profession in a different way. So when I started to make Force Majeure, I had an idea that we could combine like the best part of the American cinema that is so dependent of bringing the audience into the cinemas, because otherwise they go bankrupt and you lose your job and you can't pay your kids high school. And the best part of the European cinema, that is that we want to discuss something in society. We want to provoke thoughts and questions. And there's a possibility to combine these two ways of approaching cinema. And so from Force Majeure and The Square, this was really something that was outspoken when it came to how we was going to do the film. And when Triangle of Sadness were written and done, then it was also definitely, okay, what makes it work for us today? If we have basically all content at home, and what makes it work for us to leave our homes and go into cinema and share an experience with other people? It have to be a wild, entertaining ride, a roller coaster ride for adults, because I don't want to leave out the aspect of provoking thoughts and the intellectual aspect of it. But at the same time, I have to create something that the audience can enjoy. And I have to say one last thing about this that I think is interesting. I had a friend that was flying from Venice Film Festival to Toronto Film Festival. Then you have the whole industry the film industry is on these flights. And he was curious, what are they looking on when they are flying in one of these long-haul flights? And so he was like looking over the shoulders of people, and none of them were watching their own films. All of them were watching Adam Sandler. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with Adam Sandler, but I think if we have an industry that actually is not like clicking on our own films when we're sitting on a long-haul flight, okay, there's something that we maybe have to change a little bit. So yes, it was 100% like trying to be true to how I react and what kind of films I want to see myself as an audience, and really try to create a ride.
Thank you. We're going to come back to Triangle of Sadness and speak about it in some detail, but I think I'd like to go back to the beginning. What is it that first drew you to the cinema? Why did you want to make films? What were the first films that made you think, I want to do this too?
Well, I started out as a ski filmmaker, so I was making ski films. That's how I got to know the profession of filming. And I was traveling around the Alps and North America and a little bit in Asia also, filming skiing in the winters and editing it together in the summers. And we did like half-an-hour-long action sport films with skiing that we sold to other dedicated skiers, free skiers. And so that was my first experience of this profession, and I watched ski films many more times than I watched films from classic films. So when I started to film school, I got very tired of being in ski resorts after a while, and I applied for a film school in Gothenburg that is called Akademi Valand Film. It's a 3-year bachelor film directing school with both documentary and fiction. You study both. So when I started on that school, I was not a cineast. I didn't have any really connection with the history of filmmaking and so on. But I saw a film when I was on that school, and it was Code Unknown by Michael Haneke, and it was something that just blew me away. I just had seen a director that was trusting the audience, that was provoking thoughts and questions, and had such a suspense. And so for me, that film was really like something that, okay, this is the direction that I want to walk in.
So The Guitar Mongoloid is the first film, your first fiction film, and we're going to have a look at a clip from the film, which is from very early on, of a street busker, a very unusual street busker. So let's have a look at the clip from The Guitar Mongoloid. So a very unusual cover version of The Lion Sleeps Tonight, and emblematic of the film as a whole, I think. Your first works were documentary films, and this was your first fiction, but it's very documentary-like, I think. Tell us about the experience of making this film and how you found the characters.
Yes, there was another film that I was inspired also during the film school. There was Gammo of Harmony Korine that also had a kind of wild approach to fiction filmmaking, and it was hard, very blurred line between like the documentary and the fiction. And he was also inspiration for me. I had during the film school I had made documentaries. I made a documentary about my peer group, my friends that I was skiing together with, and it was almost like a growing up movie of like saying goodbye to your youth. And my second documentary I did on the film school was about my parents. They had been divorced for 23 years, and all of a sudden they were singles, both again, and I brought them back together in front of the camera and wanted to talk about the divorce. So it was two very like intimate projects that I was, how to say, going into topics that was very, very close to me. And after those two films, I didn't really felt that I had any other documentary project that I could approach or that I was interested in. So I started to write down like fragmented scenes, and I had an idea about how I should get into the Swedish film scene. And this was during the 90s, the late 90s, that I started to think about this film, and I started to shoot it in the beginning of 2000. And you know, I had a feeling of like that there were strong conventions in the cinema where everything was so safe, so you didn't really have to be on your toes and reflect on what you saw. It was the opposite of my heroes than like Michael Haneke and so on. So if I had an idea, if I break the convention of the narrative of how they are telling the things and do a kind of fragmented film, and I get into the arena that I have like these old, how do you say, critics that have been reviewing films their whole life, that they had to relate to this material. I was just curious to see what would they write. And so it was a very fragmented story with scenes that is kind of provokes the thought: is it fiction? Is it documentary? Who are these people? Etc. Etc. And when the film was released, then I would say half of the critics just like slaughtered the film, said it was like a horrible, and half of the critics said it was a really good film. And I used it on the DVD. It was like a DVD edition of the film, and on the back of the cover it said like the best Swedish film of the year, and it got like the 5 stars and so on, and some 4. But then when you open the DVD when you got home, in the inside of the case it said this worst Swedish film of the year, and you had all the like the crossed one, you know. So I mean, it was a way of like creating a certain kind of insecure feeling, and letting the audience actually decide what is it that they are watching, how should I relate to it. Yeah.
And how did you find the characters, or decide on the characters?
Well, this boy, Erik Rutström is his name, he was basically he was the one that solved the idea of the film for me, because I have written all these fragmented scenes. but I didn't know how to tie them together. And one day I saw this boy playing on the streets of Gothenburg, and sitting down exactly like he does in this clip. And he just was like, who is this boy? Is he homeless? Where is his parents? And I thought I could use him as a red thread through the film, and that we follow him, and basically he is like experiencing many of the different situations that is in the film. So it's a combination, I would say, of casting amateurs, and there are some actors in the film also, but a lot of people that is basically street casted or people that I know in some way.
In preparation for this conversation, I had the great pleasure of rewatching all your films in quick succession, and it was really fantastic to see your development of the themes that recurred through the films. An exploration of masculinity, an analysis of the oddities and hypocrisies of people, interrogations of societal structures. At the same time, we see a different kind of progression, if you call it that, moving up the world of privilege, from the total outsiders of the Guitar Mongoloid to sort of regular people in Involuntary, to the simply well-off, let's say, in Force Majeure, to the cultural elites in The Square, and then to the ultra-privileged, crazy billionaires in Triangle of Sadness. So, two questions. At the outset, was it a conscious decision to make films around these themes? Did you think, I'm going to focus on these themes over a long period of time, and to take this sort of sociological approach? And then also, did you think, I'm going to move up this ladder of privilege with each film?
No, I never had that as an idea when I started to make the movies. But I mean, in some way, after making Force Majeure, I started also to live a little bit of a different life that I had lived before. I started to go a lot to the US. I was spending some time in LA. I started to spend time with some billionaires, actually. And the art world that was portrayed in The Square was maybe also like following a little bit my own journey of being like a respected director in Sweden and so on. And so, and I mean, I think for me, it have always been very important in my movies to try to corner myself, try to provoke questions that in some ways like cornering myself and make myself ask questions about my position, about how I look on my fellow human beings and so on. And yeah, so in some way it's also following my own life a little bit. I'm not a part of the ultra rich, I'm not at all, of course not, but when it comes to Triangle of Sadness, I got together with my wife, Sina, and she's a fashion photographer. And this was 8 years ago, and all of a sudden I'm ending up in certain kind of situation that her fashion shoots are taking place. And so a lot of the scenes and a lot of the themes that comes from the film is things that I have encountered myself. And yeah, and I keep on trying to tell stories and use situations that I've encountered in my life, basically.
So after the Guitar Mongoloid, you make a film called Involuntary. And it's a film about people facing these dilemmas, moral dilemmas, people trying not to lose face or have gone through some sort of embarrassment. We're going to look at a clip of a bus driver who is speaking to someone that he doesn't really know, he's just met, but really revealing a great deal about himself and asking very tough questions. So let's have a look at the clip from Involuntary.
It's fun because when we shot this scene, the actor that is playing the bus driver, he didn't have a driver license for buses. So it is a bus driver that's driving the bus, and the actor is just sitting on the left side of him. So the bus driver had to like point and give her the note. It's quite funny. But it's an interesting situation to look at. I remember what the inspiration was. I mean, I was dealing with Involuntary. That was a film where I basically was focusing on our fear of losing face, social awkward situations where social contracts are broken. And I remember I was in a restaurant, and next to me sits a man that you realize he recently have been going through a divorce. And he has his emotions on the outside. And he just has such an urge of opening up, and he tells everyone what he's going through. And it's a very touching stage for a human being. It's tragical, but it's also very comical, I think, when someone have to deal with all this information and you don't know how to respond.
In Involuntary, you're looking at people sort of terrified of being embarrassed or losing face. In your later films, we see some truly shameless people, or people behaving in a shameless way. Can you tell us about this notion of shame in your work and people faced with these confounding dilemmas, and why it's so revealing of humanity for you?
Well, I think that it's very interesting. I mean, the expectation of who we should be and what we should do, and the fact that we are herd animals, human beings, and there are some things that just physical aspects of being a human being. If you look at the human eye, you see we have a lot of white around our eyes, and it makes it very possible or easy for us to detect where another human being is looking. So I can see almost on the back row of you here that you're looking towards me, and we become very sensible for other people's looks, and if someone is looking 1 or 2 seconds too long. And since we're herd animals, we are terrified of being excluded of the group. And if you look at the aspect of shame, I think human being is the only living animal that actually can, in one moment, survival instinct can struck in, and we can break social contracts. For an example, if you look at the avalanche scene in Force Majeure, where there is an avalanche getting closer to an outdoor restaurant.
We're going to see it.
Are you going to see it? Okay, but then I take another example. There was a teacher that was on a ferry, a South Korean ferry, and there was a catastrophe happening on the ferry, so the ferry went over and it was going down to the bottom of the ocean. In survival instinct, this teacher, he abandons his students and gets into a lifeboat, and he survives, but almost all his students dies. 2 months later, when he is in his home, he's dealing with shame. He's dealing with have broken the social contract of what his profession and what he should have done, and in shame he commits suicide. So if you look at human being like that, in one moment survival instinct is put in and culture is put out. But then when we are living in safe, culture is put in, and it's stronger than survival instinct. So this guy actually committed suicide because he couldn't live with the shame. And it must be completely unique for a human being. So that aspect of that we are social creatures, that we constantly are maneuvering our situation when we're meeting people, or you have hierarchies and you have manners, you have there's an etiquette of how we should behave in so many situations. I love to break it because then it's like all of a sudden anything can happen. And so a lot of my scenes are based on dilemmas, that is social dilemmas. For example, in the bus ride in Involuntary, there's a woman that had broken the curtain in the toilet on this bus. And the bus driver, they stop and they go out and they eat. And when the bus driver comes back and everybody goes back into the bus driver is very upset. It's not 100% clear that he's talking about this little curtain. It's a little plastic curtain. And the lady that have done this, she's like just thinking, okay, is he talking about that, or what is this? I guess it will blow over, you know. And the bus driver, he's aiming towards a group of youngsters, you know, like, okay, you can have fun and so on, but you can't break things in this bus, you know. And it comes out that it is the curtain. And the lady, she doesn't say anything, and the bus driver goes back to the seat where he's driving. But instead of starting the bus, he turns off the engine, and he goes like, and he takes the mic and he says, actually, I don't want to continue this trip before the one that did this confesses. And this is a typical social dilemma that I love, because now the lady that I have broken the curtain, she have two options. Either she says, okay, it was me, or she doesn't say anything. Both of them are painful. And if she doesn't say anything immediately, it's going to be harder and harder for her to confess. And when I was shooting the scene, I approach it like almost like in a sociological way. You know, I have to believe that it's possible for her to not tell it was her. And in the beginning, she was sitting a little bit too close to the bus driver, and then she actually just could do like, excuse me, it was me. But I didn't want to give her that opportunity, so I put her a little bit further off. And all of a sudden, also the actor can say, no, actually now I wouldn't like make a scene. I would probably be silent and not say anything. But a dilemma, if you want to write a good scene when it comes to movie making, look for a dilemma. Look for that there are two or more options, but whatever option you go for, it will have consequences.
And an interesting thing about the bus driver, who we see is quite destroyed, feels powerless. He then has a chance to assert his power and says, I'm not going to drive anymore. Yeah. I'm in charge now. And I think that's wonderful about that character, that we see a reversal of that character from powerlessness to being powerful, but it's not actually that powerful.
No,
right? Yeah.
But I love public transport. I love when we have to like put our trust in one person, like the captain in Triangle of Sadness. On next film, I'm going to take place on a flight, or trams, or yeah, where we don't. There may be one person that is in charge, and all of the other of us have to like just go on and accept this. And it's something interesting with these small, how to say, micro societies that you can highlight things in our society.
When I first saw Play, I lived in South Africa, and I thought, and still think, the film is absolutely masterful. And its look at race, and we're going to look at a clip from Play where it's the center of the city. There are three kids who see a group of black kids and are instantly terrified. They think something bad is going to happen, and they're on a tram in the scene, and we're going to see their fear of what's going to happen, even if they don't have a rational reason to feel fearful at this stage. So let's have a look and go to the clip of Play. They don't escape. They don't escape. They get caught. I think this scene is so complex, and I want to talk a bit about the depiction of race relations in your films. I think what I find interesting about this is, firstly, the white kids try to sell their Asian friend down the river. There's an echo of the scene in The Square, where Christian tries to send his black colleague into the building. So it's almost this racial hierarchy that's there, that's unsaid, but yeah, you should go because it's somehow easier for you. Yeah. There's an awkwardness that you depict around race relations that goes way beyond the veneer that everything's okay or everyone is equal. You depict stereotypes or how people perceive other people in what I think is a very genuine way that's also quite disturbing. Do you have a view of how race relations will improve at all?
With equality, of course, like economical equality, definitely. And it was interesting when I did this film. I can tell you a little bit about the background of this film, because it was inspired of events that took place in the city where I'm brought up in Sweden, Gothenburg. And I got to know it through a newspaper article that they had catched the young robbers, because it was a group of young boys that was, for 3 years of time, were robbing other boys in the center of the city of Gothenburg in a mall. And the robbers were between 12 and 14 years old or something like that. And they were very good in spotting young boys that was into the city for the first time. That was a little bit insecure. And there were over like 70 cases in the court files that I could read through when I was starting to get into these robberies. And you find out that the robbers have one thing in common, and it is that they are black. They come from a different part of the city. Okay, they come from a suburb, but they don't go in the same school. They had met through a football team. And I was doing, during the research, I was doing interviews with one of the robbers. And he told me how they were doing the robberies. They played a quite advanced role play that was called like good cop and bad cop. So they went into the city, they were going into the mall, they were spotting for some kids that they saw were new into the city, and they woke up and they say, excuse me, do you know what time it is? And these boys, the victims, they take up their phone and they look on their phone, and then immediately when the robbers see the phone, they say, hey, where did you get that phone from? My kid brother was robbed the other day. He had exactly a phone like that. And they're like, oh, but I haven't stolen anything. Okay, wait a minute, we have to talk to, it was your brother, right? Yeah, okay. And then bad cop comes in, and he's like playing a little aggressive. And good cop then says, okay, take it easy. We don't know if they have done it or not. Like, you just take it easy. And in order to solve this, we have to go and show the phone for the kid brother that is just on a 10 minutes away or something like that. And they got all the boys, the victims, to follow them without using any violence out of the mall where there's a lot of people to a back street where there's no one, and then they just say, give us all your stuff. And the robbers, when I did the research and I talked to the robber, he said, okay, we were very aware of how to use the stigmatized image of the black man that exists in the Swedish society. Of course, they didn't use these words, but they knew how to use this in order to create an unoutspoken threat towards the boys. And the adults that was watching these things that happen, in the court cases, it was 2 times that adults was interacting. All the other times they were actually watching, they realized something strange is going on, but they didn't dare to go in because they also didn't want to represent prejudice. Why couldn't they be friends, blah, 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 blah. So it was like a topic that was connected to class, to race, to prejudice, to role-playing, to stereotypes, reproducing stereotypes that they had picked up in popular culture. That was something that when I presented ID, people didn't know how to talk about it. So when the film was reviewed in Sweden, I don't think one reviewer mentioned that the boys were black. So all of a sudden we have a topic that is connected to class that we look in a complete different direction and don't dare to talk about. So I think that I felt if I have this set up in a movie, if we're really showing this, like how will people react? What will they project on this? And the debate that was happening afterwards was super interesting, because they were saying they made the black boys as they were representing the black skin color, and the white boys were the normality. They were not representing white. And then it's like, and there was like people that wanted really to do good, you know. They was telling me, but I know a lot of black boys in school because I'm a teacher and they are super nice guys. And I'm like, why are you connecting the boys in your school with these kind of extreme boys that was doing kind of extreme things? And so it was a great platform to actually start to talk about how skin color is portrayed, how we are completely, paralyzed when we're trying to talk about it. And the well-willing behavior that actually just is racist. And I think that everybody that got into this debate in Sweden, this was 2011, they got a little punched, you know. No one get out of it with dignity. And but it was a learning process for all, and I'm very grateful for everybody that dared to write something or do and expose their how novice, how new they were in trying to talk about these topics. And I think it looks much better today when it comes to representation, which I'm a big fan of, really, and that it's important to give representation to different groups, and it's a complete different discussion, because I felt also back then, if it was like an entertaining movie, like I think it was Iron Man or some movie like that. The bad guys, they were like, I don't remember if they were Arabic or what they were, but it was like so absurdly strange that we could reproduce these kind of stereotypes in cinema, and they were never questioned. But as soon as you were doing art house cinema, people got furious. So, yeah.
I think it's a brilliant film. I think it's a brilliant film, and everyone should see it. We're going to move on to Force Majeure and this incredible scene that you mentioned earlier. And now that you say you were making ski films for a long time, the scene makes even more sense. But I think it's one of the great scenes of cinema of recent times. And let's have a look at the clip from Force Majeure, and then we'll talk about it. Okay, so how did you come up with the idea for this genius scene? We meet a family. They seem very happy. They're at this lovely ski resort, and the father's cowardice becomes the center of the film. He abandons his family, and it goes back to what you were talking about, survival instinct. And how did you come up with this idea?
Well, the thing was that I had looked on YouTube, Googled avalanches on YouTube, and I found a clip. There was an outdoor restaurant and a group of people that are sitting and eating, and they are spotting an avalanche that starts tumbling down the mountainside. And it basically plays out quite much like this. You know, in the beginning, like, wow, beautiful. And I loved how close it was from beautiful to scream in complete panic. And it happened pretty much like this also. It's only the snow smoke that reaches the restaurant. And everybody that have freaked out then afterwards have to go back and continue their lunch. And I thought it was so interesting just that you have been uncivilized, and then you're going back and you're starting to continue eating lunch together. And I told this idea that I wanted to do that scene to a friend of mine, a male actor, and he is a guy. He have a lot of guilt in his body. You can tell when you see him, like he's ashamed of something that he have done. I mean, not necessarily that he have done something, but he's like a self-critical person, you know. And he says to me, the day after, he comes to me after I've been telling about that, he says to me, you know, okay, you told about this family that is going to be on the restaurant and this is going to happen. What if only the father runs away? And when he says that, I'm like, okay, there's the film. Yeah. I only had a fragment, and there's the film. And my process is very often like this. I tell about my film to everybody that I meet, all my friends, and very often they come up with an idea that is much more brilliant than I could have thought of sitting and writing myself. And because it's like playing ping pong with two brains or more. And for me, it has been very, very important to have that kind of process, to invite people to the process. And then, okay, I'm the one that is deciding what's ending up in the film. But when it told that, then it was like, okay, now I can start to write this film. I have never had such an easy process of writing when I wrote Force Majeure. And it was so interesting to go into statistics because before the screenings of Force Majeure, I always ask the audience, oh, are there any couples in the audience? And there's always someone that is, you know, and, okay, you can see the film as a relationship test. So instead of spending like 10 or 15 years together and then break up, maybe you can come to a quicker decision by watching this. And then it was so many of the women in the audience. This is funny, and they like to bring this up. That said, yeah, but my husband, he would never do this. But the thing is that I have been looking at statistics on ferry catastrophes from Titanic to Estonia, and what you can tell is that the percentage of survivors, there are men in a certain age that are the ones that have the ability of acting egoistic when it comes to a crisis situation. And the women and the children are actually the one that dies. So I'm sorry, your men, it's much more likely that they're going to run. And don't blame them, it's nature, you know.
I want to ask you about, something that goes through your films, is that we rarely meet a conventionally likable character. Or we never meet a conventionally likable character that we see in the films. But we still see ourselves in these unlikable characters. How do you want us to view them? Do you want us to dislike them, or do you intend for us to see how, in a similar situation, even though we know it's wrong, we could behave in the way that they do?
Well, I have been interested in sociology since I was a kid, basically. My mother, she was a teacher. She told me about like the classic sociological experiments, you know, like the Solomon Asch conformity test, the milligram experiment, you know, when there's a test person giving electrical shocks to another test person. And what I love about sociology is that it's putting the highlight on the context of a situation rather than on the human being. So it's not putting blame on the individual. It's rather trying to put up a setting for us so we understand that we can fail, that we can morally or ethically fail. And I think it's a very sympathetic way of looking at the human being. I think that we live in a time where we are staring ourselves blind on the individual, and we are trying to, identify the good guy and the bad guy, instead of like putting a highlight on the context of the situation that creates our behavior. So I never feel that I dislike any of my characters, and it's definitely not my intention to make the audience dislike them. But I am just much more interested in when we're failing as human beings than when we succeed. I'm not so interested in like heroes or, well, here we have someone that did a really good thing. I'm much more interested in the setup of a situation that we as an audience also can identify, oh my God, I probably would have done the same thing. And once again, you can go back to the dilemma. In sociology, there are so many of the experiments in the setup that have the dilemma in its construction. So if you go into a test room where you have a doctor in a white coat telling you give shocks, okay, either you are doing what he's saying or you're revolting. So it's a dilemma. You have two choices, but they are going to be hard, both of them. And therefore we can also understand that we probably would give electrical shocks. So, but sometimes when I hear that people think I'm a misanthrope or like because, but I am really not a misanthrope. I really like other human beings. I think socializing is the big part of life, and I have a great trust in other human beings. But it's just that I'm not so interested in when we are succeeding.
Speaking of moral and ethical failures, we're going to move on to the square, where we meet this fascinating character, Christian. We're not going to see him in the clip. I really had so much difficulty choosing a clip from the square because I love almost every scene in that film equally, and some make me laugh so much when I just think about them, like just the audio of the collapsing chairs when they're trying to. I think that is one of the most hilarious things I've ever seen because it's just so reflective of the art world. But we're going to look at a clip where this gallery, to promote this installation, goes to a marketing company and gets them to make a clip to generate interest in the exhibition. So let's have a look at the clip from the square. The square is a sanctuary of trust and safety, and it's when we played the Square at the Sydney Film Festival, I ran into a very prominent gallerist, and I said, you have to see this film, it's about the art world. And he loved it, and he wrote me the next day. He said, you know, the only mistake you guys made is that you misclassified the film as a feature film. It's a documentary, right? There's so many brilliant moments in the film, and I want to ask you, how did you come up with the idea for the Square, and how much fun was it to just rip into the art world in the manner that you do?
Well, the idea actually started after play, after we were doing the film about these young boys, and I, together with a friend, we wanted to try to create like a traffic sign that changed our behavior in the public spaces, that changed our behavior in the cities. So when I was making play, the bystander effect was so present. You know, like the adults didn't interact. And it was like that from my father's generation, when he was a kid, His parents put an address tag around his neck and sent him out on the streets to play when he was 6 years old in the center of Stockholm. And you could tell that back then in the 50s, you were looking at other adults as someone that would help your children if they ended up in problems. But when I was raising my children, it was almost that I was teaching my children that other adult is someone that is a threat. And therefore there was like this kind of true parallel worlds where the robberies of play could happen in a mall in broad daylight and people were not interacting. So we got the idea, okay, what if we make a white marked square where we build a culture around it that if someone is standing in the square, it's my obligation as a fellow human being to address this person and ask, okay, I can see that you're standing in the square. We made a little sign that was connected to it that said the square is a sanctuary of trust and responsibility. Within its bounds we share equal rights and let me think. Yeah, equal rights and what do you say? Yeah, anyway, like the human rights, basically you and human rights. We built this in one city. We actually built it in 4 different places. And in the first city we built it in Värnamo, we also did an art exhibition about it. And in the city of Värnamo, this square still exists. It's now been there for 6 years. There have been a lot of different ways they are using that square in order to get attention for something that there was a group of handicapped people that was a benefit was taken away from them. Then they went and stand in the square and the local paper came and took a picture and so on. It actually have been used. This idea is so simple. It's just as simple as the traffic rules. You know, like, and I am amazed by the traffic rules. Don't you think it's amazing that we can draw like a zebra crossing and immediately all the cars are going to pay respect and be careful with the pedestrians?
Not in Marrakesh.
It's a little bit different where you are. But okay, let's say everybody drives on the right side of the road, right? Isn't it amazing that we have built a social contract that is so strong that everybody drives on the right side of the road? In Sweden, 67, we changed from left-hand traffic to right-hand traffic over one night. There were fewer accidents the upcoming half a year than there have ever been in the history of traffic. Isn't it amazing that we can organize ourselves and create a social contract that is that strong? And when you talk about our society, if you talk about how we create an equal, solidaric society, we tend to learn each other. It's a very complicated question. It's no. It's very equality is very complicated. Is it really very complicated, or is it actually that we can create a social contract? It just have to be strong enough to that we are reminded of it. And so the square started like an idea like this. The fun part was the reactions on it, because people didn't think it was good art. In the art museum, when we presented it, no one thought this was good art. It's like, well, they didn't understand it. And when we were starting to talk about the content of it, you realize there's not really a conflict in that we should be nice to each other. So to promote the idea was a little bit hard. And when I started to write the film, I actually wanted to highlight this idea because in its all simplicity, I think it's a great idea. And I wanted to add the kind of reaction that we had from the way when we were trying to promote it. You know, there's no conflict. There's a lack of conflict. In order to get attention to it, we maybe have to go on the complete opposite way than what the square is standing for, like their values. We have to do something shocking. So I was looking into the publicity industry, the PR agents, the advertising agents, and I was looking into politicians, how they are dealing with the competition of getting attention. And I thought it was hilarious, you know, like if you live in a democratic society, like if you live in Sweden, in order to get votes as a politician, of course, people need to know who you are. And how do you get people to know who you are in these days when there is such a strong competition for getting attention? And it was something that a party leader of a small political party that was called the Pirate Party. They were dealing with rights, internet rights. And they are pro-free sharing and so on. And from one election, they got a lot of votes. To the next election, they almost didn't get any votes at all. And the leader of the party, he was very, he was sad, and he was telling the media, we have even tried to tell that we are pro-legalization of marijuana, but they don't write about us anyway. So you understand the complexity of being a politician, because you have to push your language and you have to push your rhetorics into a controversial way. And you could see Trump, when Trump came, of course, all of a sudden, everybody was writing about him. And he got a lot of attention. And we had the idea about, okay, if we report about him, people will not vote for him. But unfortunately, I think that we human beings are not that rational. And I want to take an example that is about Pepsi-Cola, how they won market shares from Coca-Cola. They realized that if we say 51% of the people testing our product says that we are better than Coca-Cola, so they were putting themselves up against Coca-Cola, and very quickly it became 50-50. So people were actually pro-Pepsi or pro-Coca-Cola. And all questions that you do like this is okay, Republicans or Democrats, then it's almost always 50-50 when it comes to the voters. So if you get a lot of attention, half of the people will go against you, and half of the people will be pro. I thought it was interesting just to criticize the kind of media climate we are, where attention is the biggest part of the economy, where we have press ethic and a history of journalism that all of a sudden is almost left behind, because there have been such a strong economical competition in order to get attention. So the journalists have to also leave their press ethics behind, because in the papers they have a list of these are the top 10 journalists. It's a crazy world that we live in when it comes to the attention. So we start to report about the world like it's more conflict than it's actually what's going on in the world. I don't recognize myself when I look at the world in the digital arena or when I see it in my own life in the analog world. And these were the things that I was interested in investigating.
And a quick question, how different do you think it is, the level of pretentiousness between the world of art and the world of cinema?
If you compare them, or no, but they are very similar, I would say, in many ways. But I was interested in, when it came to the world of art, that it was a certain kind of, how to say, language that was so advanced so you could shut people out of it, and that I don't really see in the world of cinema.
When I read a film synopsis, I get it. When I read a description of an art exhibition, I think, what on earth are they talking about?
Yeah. And it's scary, because you want to understand it, and you don't want to admit that you don't understand it.
Oh, you capture it brilliantly. We're going to go on to Triangle of Sadness. We still have some time left. And we're going to look at the clip of the captain, a Marxist, having a discussion with an Eastern European uber capitalist. Yeah. Let's have a look at the clip from Triangle of Sadness. One of the many wonders of the film is the set of characters. So I want to know, how did you settle on these particular characters? The oligarch, the aged and polite arms dealers, the influencers, the Marxist captain, a woman whose vocabulary is limited to Indenvolken. How did you settle on these characters?
Well, some of them are inspired of my life. My mother-in-law, she had a stroke 6 years ago, and she got aphasia. And the only sentence she can say is in the Wolken. She's from Germany, which means up in the clouds. And so everything she communicates is with in the Wolken. And I thought it was amazing to see in that family, they could even talk about childhood memories, and she was going like in a Vulcan, you know, and with how she's tonating the sentence, she could communicate so much. And so actually that comes from my wife's mother. And I wanted to put like one of the characters on the island that was disabled in some way and had to rely on the group in a different way. So that's the reason that she came in the film. But I realized a little bit when I was cutting Triangle of Sadness that it was almost like Tintin, you say, like Hergé, the comic book Tintin, like Captain Haddock and Castafiore, the opera singer, and so it was almost like stereotypes in a way, or like, how to say, yeah, archetypes. That the ensemble was built around. And so it was, Triangle of Sadness was for me a little bit more like a chess game. You know, you have this player and that player and that player, and what if this player goes there, then the other player comes there. So looking at the setup of the situation, a little bit more like that, actually. And I consider the captain a Marxist, alcoholist, idealist. Yeah.
About 30 minutes, about an hour into the film, you take us into 30 minutes of sustained mayhem with great amounts of vomit and feces, more than I've seen in a film in a very long time. Beginning with the ship in the storm and I guess concluding with the attack by the pirates. Can you tell us about the orchestration of this passage of the film and how it was created technically? It's so detailed. Tell us how you did this.
Well, we built the set on a gimbal, so the whole dining room that you see in Triangle of Sadness was built on a gimbal that we could rock up to 20 degrees. And so we were shooting on a rocking gimbal where half of the crew actually had to eat seasick pills because they got seasick of being on that platform 8 hours a day. And for me, when I was shooting it, myself, I didn't think it was so fun to look on people vomiting. But it's much more fun to look at people that are looking at people that are vomiting. And especially if they are in a fine dining situation like this. And the inspiration came from, because I did research on a luxury sailing yacht that is called Sea Cloud. And one day it was heavy waves and strong winds. And I was going to the dinner. It was an Italian buffet, and everybody was very nicely dressed, you know, and was sitting there and eating. And slowly the seasickness came closer and closer, and people are starting to get more and more silent. And you can tell that they are starting to feel themselves, am I getting seasick or not? And I was sitting next to a lady, and all of a sudden we hear someone vomiting in the other end of the room. And it was so interesting to look at this lady, how she should react. Because you hear like, whoa, and she wants to look, but she doesn't want to do it at the same time. So she's like looking a little bit, and then should she continue to eat after this, or what do you do? So it was like, once again, like this social contract thing that I was interested in like highlighting. And it was a very hard scene to shoot because it was so fragmented. It's like quite many short clips, and we were shooting maybe for 2 weeks. I think it was 13 shooting days where we were just taking different shots of people vomiting, and then in the editing it took almost half a year to build this together because it was very hard to create like the right kind of curve and so on. It was a little bit too chaotic for me to do that kind of scene, actually. I didn't enjoy it that much shooting it.
But the audience loves it. I think it's just unforgettable. It's this incredible passage that I think really makes the film as wonderful and wild as it is.
I knew that I wanted to, since the film starts in the fashion world and it goes to this luxury yacht and then it should end up on a deserted island, I almost wanted the film to end up in a surrealistic feeling when it came to the storm. So it was important for me to push that very far and to try to maybe make it possible for the audience to see it as a metaphor for something. I don't know for what, but if you go far enough, it can becomes maybe a metaphor for something.
For those who haven't seen the film, we won't give you too many spoilers, but we have to say that there's a shipwreck and a bunch of people end up on an island. And I want to talk to you about the transformation of one character in particular. Abigail, played by the wonderful Dolly de Leon. Her character is usually one we'd so easily miss, right? Like even I only realized when I watched the film the second time that we meet her first as a cleaner when she's treated very rudely by Carl and Yaya when she tries to clean their room. And later on the island, we see her rise to prominence from toilet cleaner to captain or queen even. I'd like to know how you cast this incredible Dolly de Leon, who so easily conveys vulnerability, tenderness, and then imperiousness. And how important was it for you to put a spotlight on this figure who usually would be little more than an extra?
Well, I think the idea of having one of the Filipino workers from the boat on the island and making her the only one that actually have the skill of surviving on an island, know how to make fire and how to fish, that was something that just comes from the situation of these luxury yachts. It's really, really interesting to see how strong hierarchies there are there. And the one that are lowest on the payroll is unfortunately the Filipino community, the people that are working in the industry that comes from the Philippines. And I thought also it would be interesting to, in some way, almost make her invisible on the yacht, that people don't really pay attention to her, or she just flashing by in one scene. And when she comes to the island, I wanted her to quite quickly take command over the group in some way. So it was a very challenging part for her to play. Just in 3 scenes or something, I think it is that you should see that she's frustrated, that she's treated in the same way that she was treated on the yacht, and then she's revolting and taking control. And it really demands an actor that can play high status and how do you mean be more high status than this alpha male, like the Russian oligarch and so on. So it have to be a tough cookie that is playing this part. So we did a lot of improvisations with actors that we met in Manila. And Dolly de Leon, she on her first improvisation, you felt, okay, this is believable. I could believe that she actually is going to be the strongest one in this group. And she just had a fantastic, playful way of approaching the scenes.
The captain says at one point, where while you're to the Russian oligarch, while you're swimming in abundance, the rest of the world is drowning in misery. And we see the stratification on the yacht, from the ultra-wealthy to the entirely white crew, literally chanting money, 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 to the underclass of mostly Filipino cleaners. If what we experience on the yacht is a microcosm of contemporary society, and in the film we see the end game is explosive, how do you see things playing out in real life?
Well, I can tell you a little bit about the next project I'm working with. It's called The Entertainment System is Down. And there was an investigation on airplanes. It takes place on a long-haul flight on an airplane. And the reason that I'm bringing up this is because it explains something about us. You know, on the flights, lately, a term that is called air rage have been starting to be used. And air rage is when one of the passengers gets so problematic so they actually have to do an emergency landing, or they have to strap this passenger up in a seat in order to try to control. And the numbers of air rage have increased quite much lately. And the different airline companies started to look into why is air rage increasing and what are the aspects of making this happen. And it turned out that if you board a plane through business class when you go to economy, the risk for air rage goes up 4 times. So it's much safer to board a plane if you go to economy on the right and to business class on the left. So for all the rich people, it's very important that we keep away that the poor people don't see how rich we are, because that is much more dangerous. So of course, I mean, if you have a society that is very unequal, it's going to create more friction, and that's how I look at it. But at the same time, I think in general we have to look on like the aspects of us human beings that we are really great in collaborating, and that we are very interested in equality. We are interested in trying to create a fair society. So I don't have any dystopic idea about the future, except from maybe the environmental situation.
We have a few minutes for questions. So if you have one, please go ahead. Go ahead. A microphone is coming to you.
Hello, my name is Osman. I'm a second-year film student at ESAB Marrakesh, and seeing your work, and especially the short films, I'm talking autobiographical scene or Incident by the Bank, I couldn't help but be fascinated by your, I don't know how to call it, but almost visually economical approach to storytelling. So where did that come from, and do you think, are you crazy enough? Keyword here is enough, because let's face it, you are kind of crazy. Are you crazy enough to take the same approach to a whole feature film? Like, I'm thinking like Hitchcock's Rear Window, but on steroids, if you know what I mean. Like a whole feature film from one perspective following through.
Well, you said economically shot, right? Like, yeah. You know, it's interesting because when I started to make the films, you saw also now in the progress of the different films that in the beginning, for me, it was very important to make limitations for myself when I was shooting. So the first film, I wanted to shoot the scenes from one angle without having the possibility to cut. And for me, it was a way of like trying to, take away other possibilities. So if you're shooting a scene from one angle with a fixed camera and you're not going to be able to cut, the limitation in itself will create energy. It will make me like being able to choose, can we stand here? No, it's not possible. If I'm standing here, yeah, now maybe it's possible to tell the whole scene. So for me in the beginning of my career, I loved to have these very strong limitations. Of course, a film that is done like that suffers from the dynamics, because when you cut, then you can create some dynamic. But a sequence shot, when you're not cutting, is also powerful in some way. It's almost a physical feeling and a physical experience when you see a long sequence shot that is choreographed and done in a very, very precise way. I still like to use the long sequence shots, but I don't want to be dogmatic. I don't want to lock myself into a corner because it's very unnecessary. You should use it in the sense that it really creates the most powerful language, I think. And the second question, I didn't really understand it.
I think he's asking, could you do a film like Rear Window?
Yeah, okay, then I understand. Yeah. So like that you only do it through one perspective.
Like a Rear Windows, like a Hitchcock's Rear Window, but more advanced version, like just one shot from the window.
Yeah, sure. Okay, but I mean, if you find the right setup for an idea like this, sure. But of course, it's going to be very hard to do it. And sometimes what I feel nowadays when I'm working that. You don't want to be spectacular in a way only because you want to try to with limitations. It have to play a role when it comes to what the thematics are and what you want to highlight. Yeah, but I did a short film that is called Incident by a Bank. where I was reconstructing a failed robbery attempt that I was an eyewitness to when I was walking the streets of Stockholm. And for me, it was very important to do that in a sequence shot with one angle, and it was basically like from the perspective of other side of the street and looking over to the other side of the street. So sometimes it plays a role, and yeah.
Hello. I would like to know how do you work with your actor on set if you want an intention in particular way how are your techniques for having what you want in a scene?
The actors, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. For me, it's a collaboration where I want to be completely transparent what I want with the scene and what I'm looking for, and I always want the actors to tell me if there's something that they don't believe in the script. And as soon as they say, but I would never say like this, I get very happy, because I think that they should use their human experiences of what is possible from the given situation. So then, for example, if it's something that I really want you to say this, then we can change the setup a little bit in the situation in order, is it possible for you to say it now? So what I do when I work with actors is that I always improvise a lot during the casting process also. So, for example, when I did Triangle of Sadness, I also play in this improvisation. I have played Yaya, I have played Karl, I have played the Russian oligarch, I played the Marxist captain, because then I get to know the material. And when we do those improvisations, very often the actor are doing something that is like, wow, very unexpected and great. And then you can steal those lines or be inspired of them and put them in the script. So improvisation is a part of the writing process for me. And so I'm always inviting the actors to this process. Then when we go on set, then we have rehearsed the night before we shoot the scene. And then when we start to shoot the scene the next day, the actors have flags that they have to go around. They know where they are starting, they know where they are going, and they know where they have to pass before going to the end. But I want them to be quite free and not go too quickly to the lines, because then you can sometimes start lying. It's very important that they don't say the lines until it feels 100% believable for them to say the lines. The takes in the beginning of the day then become very long. And what I do is trying to decrease the length of the scene. And I do take after take after take. And it often gets better up to take 20. Then it gets worse. Then actually you're feeling now, oh my God, what is happening? This is not so good. Then you have to push in some energy so the actors get motivated. And then hopefully if we get above the level of take 20, I say, let's have a break. And we take a half an hour break maybe. And when the actors come back, I go, okay, everybody, 5 takes left. And then I do a countdown. 4 takes left, come on now. So now it's very important that it's no improvisation at all. Now we are following very strict what we are trying to reach. And I want it to feel for the actors that we are playing an important football game together, and now let's win this football game. And I go 4 takes left, 3 takes left. And when I go the 3 last takes, this time what I did was actually, we brought the whole crew to stand behind the camera. So no one is allowed to be on set and, standing with your phone or something like that. Everybody should sit behind the camera, look at the actors, and giving them maximum attention. And we go 2 takes left. And the last take, when I was shooting Triangle of Sadness, I added one thing, and I brought a gong to set. So before I was going for the last take, I hit the gong, boom. And then when it's silent, then one of the actors have the task to start the scene. And it's a very strong presence often when you do it like that. And so the goal is to use the combination of the actor's knowledge about life, their sensibility of what's true and what's not true, my sensibility of that when I'm looking at their acting and how it's playing out in the scene, and then trying to create a super strong presence in the end, and trying to create one take that is like lifting above the others, that you really, really feel something happen in this take. And so this is the process of the many takes that I use.
We have a question here.
Thank you. So my question is a little bit simple. Is how to go from a movie lover to a filmmaker, especially when you are not studying films, but you love films?
I think that for me it was super fun to film skiing when I was younger, because I was so interested in skiing. And I was in love with the film camera, the camera in itself, the possibility to capture something. And so I teach on a film school in Gothenburg. I'm a professor at that film school. And what I always try to tell the students is, you have to film what you're interested in. You have to detect what are you really interested in, because the audience will feel if you are interested in what you have been filming or not. And if you are not interested in it, then no one else will be interested in it. So don't try to create a movie. Film what you are interested in. So are you interested in sneakers? Make a film about sneakers, or add it as an aspect of the film. So you have to follow your interest. And as soon as you do that, you also will have a lot of fun doing it. And then you have to have patience, because you need practical experience. You have to practice over and over again. And when you have practiced for a long time, you get the experience, and then you can transmit what you are interested in to the visual language. And then another thing that I also really tell the students is, talk about your films. Talk about them over and over again. Tell about your films to everyone that you meet, because when you're pitching your film and telling about your film, you're also getting to know how you should direct it. And you get to know how you're going to tell it and how you're going to write it. And when you're pitching your film in the beginning, you will probably not be that good, because you have not found out the way of communicating what you want to communicate. But for me, filmmaking is very much like having a stage performance or having a conversation around a table. If you want to have attention to what you want to say, you have to be skillful in saying it. And it's the same thing for a dialogue that it is for the visual language of making cinema. But when you're opening up and you're letting other people into the process, and they are telling you their ideas when you are inspiring them, then you can work together as a collective, and your role as a director is to decide what is going to end up in the film or not. So talk about the films is also you talk about your ideas, and dare to expose your ideas. There's nothing magical that will disappear only because you're talking about them. Actually, you will open up another layer and another layer, another layer when you're talking about your ideas.
RUBEN ÖSTLUND, it's been such a great pleasure to spend this time with you. Thank you for taking the time with us.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here with us. Thank you for being at the Marrakesh International Film Festival. Thank you so much.